I
Good
got
morning.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. It is Thursday, December the 7th at 10:02, and we're calling to order the meeting of the Transportation Committee of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. And if you would join me to start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, would you take roll call, please?
Thank you. Good morning. Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Chapman,
Here.
Gog,
Yes.
Early for Guerrero, absent Jennings,
Here.
Joyner, absent. I'll note for the record that Director Early is here. Director Lauren,
Here.
Sander,
Here.
Vice Chair Soon,
Here.
Chair Gallardo,
Here.
and ex officio member Alkinsell for Benny Paw.
Here.
Thank you.
And just want to make sure you got that Early is here. I was just raising my hand.
Yes, thank you. We've got you in the record.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for being here. The next item on our agenda is our opportunity for public comment. And this is an opportunity for anyone from the public to comment on any item that is not on the agenda today. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
There's no comment under public communications.
Thank you. And we will move on to the consent calendar, to our consent items. And again, is there any questions or any comments from the public on our consent item?
There's no public comment.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, I move to approve the consent.
Lauren seconds the item.
Thank you, Director Gog. All right. Oh, we're gonna do a roll call vote. I forget where I am. I'm looking at you, but you're not here. So Madam Clerk, if you'd take a roll call vote, please.
Sure. Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early for Guerrero,
Aye.
Jennings, Director Jennings, could you indicate your vote on the consent calendar?
Yes.
Thank you. Joyner, absent Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
and Chair Gallardo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we are going to adjourn as the SACOG Transportation Committee and convene as the Capital Valley Regional Service Authority for Freeways and Expressways Committee. And we do have a separate agenda for that. And if you will turn to that agenda and we do roll call for this committee.
Thanks, Chair Gallardo. I'll note for the record that our roll call remains the same with the addition of Director Young.
I see. Wonderful, thank you. And again, this is an opportunity for public comment to comment on any item that is not on the agenda. And do we have any public comment today?
There's no public comment.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to the consent item. There are 2 items on there, and any public comment on the consent items?
No public comment.
Then I'll look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent.
Or Young will second, whichever.
All right. We've been moved and seconded, and a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early,
Aye.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner, absent Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Young,
Yes.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
and Chair Gallardo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We move on. We have one action item, and it is the amendment to fiscal year 2023-24 budget for the CVR SAFE, and amendment for private call answering contract. And Barbara Von Bechtold will be our presenter.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Barbara Von Bechtold. I'm the program manager for the Capital Valley Regional SAFE. And before you today, we're recommending 3 amendments to the current fiscal year budget for 23-24. The first is increasing funds in the budget to address additional call answering costs for those calls that come in via 511 for people who need roadside assistance or other traveler assistance, as well as roadside call box calls. And this increase will allow us to continue funding the private call answering that's necessary to provide that traveler assistance. It'll also require, if we do approve this increase in the budget, it'll require an amendment to the current contract we have with our private call answering provider, that's AmCalm. And the second is additional funding for the El Dorado County Freeway Service Patrol that reflects increased contracting costs for the vendors that they use to provide the Freeway Service Patrol services up in El Dorado County. And last is additional funds that reflect minor increases in staff benefit costs for SACOG staff that staff the CVR Safe. So the recommendation before you today is that the CVR Safe Committee recommend that the CVR Safe Board approve the amendment to the fiscal year 23-24 CVR Safe budget, reflecting the increased costs for private call answering, the additional Freeway Service Patrol funding needs, and to update staff costs, and also delegate authority to the executive director to amend the contract with our private call answering provider to reflect current costs. And with that, I can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the committee?
So moved.
All right, no questions, and we have a motion, and do I have a second?
Second, Chapman.
Thank you. Before the voting, I'd like to see if there's any public comment on this item. Madam Clerk, any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. If we could do a roll call vote.
Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early,
Aye.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner, absent Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Young,
Yes.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
and Chair Gallardo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Barbara, if you'll stay with us for our next item is a receive and file for the fiscal year 2022-23 statistics.
That,
I can.
Chair Gallardo, is just a receive and file for information for the committee and doesn't require a presentation, but Barbara,
Any
of course, would
questions?
be
Sure,
available
yeah.
if there's questions. Yeah, sure.
Any questions from anybody on this?
Chair Gallardo, I will say that I know Director Young, when you were up in Yuba County at the board meeting in August, you said, I think actually it was Chair Kennedy who gave the story of being stuck on the side of the road and a freeway service patrol came and rescued him. And you said, we need to actually make sure we understand the value of this. So in at least a small way, the staff put together, you go back to the end of that memo there, it's receive and file, but we have a lot of, I think, really good statistics that really shows the value of this and those efforts. So, anyway, so to your request.
Perfect.
And thank you. I appreciate that. And I remember I did talk to you. I think I don't know if we were in Atlanta, wherever we were recently. I saw you, and I appreciate having that information for our board to understand. And I did see that we have an increase, and I heard Barbara say too that we have an increase in the funding because of increased calls. But I think if everybody really knew if many more people were educated on this service, then we need even more money because people will be utilizing it.
10 a day.
Thank you. Director Branscombe, did you have a comment?
Yeah, real quickly, it not only benefits those who are in immediate distress, sometimes distress backs up traffic. So there's a lot of collateral benefit in many cases.
And collateral distress, that's right.
Well, there you go.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. At this time, we are going to adjourn as the Capital Valley Regional Service Authority for Freeways and Expressways Committee, and we'll reconvene as the Transportation Committee. And our first action item is 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and Miguel Mendoza will be doing the presentation.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Chair Gallardo, Directors, Transportation Committee. The name is Miguel Mendoza, and I am a programming analyst. And the item I have before you today is the 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. And the recommendation is that the Transportation Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve by resolution the 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. And to briefly go over the resolution there, the resolution asks that SACOG adopt the attached nominations for the counties of Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba counties, the project nominations for inclusion in the 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. The second ask is that SACOG will forward the approved 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program to the California Transportation Commission. And then the third and final one is that request is that SACOG staff will be authorized to make technical modifications to the projects, to amend project descriptions, costs, program years as needed, and to provide clarification or to balance out the program for fiscal constraint. And to add one more item to kind of clarify what technical modifications are, they would be something in the lines of clarifying a post-mile marker in a description, or perhaps a number was transposed, or a PCI being pavement condition index clarification on the project. Anything beyond that, of course, we would go back and ask for approval to change anything. So that is the recommendation and a brief kind of go over the resolution. So if I could go over what the Regional Transportation Improvement Program is, it is, and I'm going to take away from our partners in El Dorado over here. I've heard them describe it as the county's chapter in the statewide Transportation Improvement Program. So the STIP, or the statewide, or the State Transportation Improvement Program, includes listings of each county and available funds for that county to program projects. In our case, as the RTPA for the 4 counties of Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba, we have 4 chapters in the book, and we are assigned an estimate of available funding for those 4 counties. The 2024 State Transportation Improvement Program does include fund estimates or revenue estimates from the years of 2024 to 2029, and those are in state fiscal years. I know we've got calendar years, federal fiscal years, state fiscal years. In this case, we are working in state fiscal years. To kind of put all of this in perspective of SACOG and what we do, in May of this year, the board awarded funds to projects in the 2023 funding round. In essence, that award was colorless in money, as we would like to say. The funding round included 3 types of revenues. We have congestion mitigation air quality, surface transportation block grant program funds, and then lastly, state transportation improvement program funds. And this is the programming action for that last type of funds. And so to kind of go back to that colorless language, this is assigning color of money and also year of funding for these projects. And if you want to reference what projects are included in this document, I believe it is part of your packet, labeled Summary of the 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. I did mention May of 2023 is when the funding round was approved by the board. And I'd like to really briefly go over sort of the schedule of how we got here. In June, the funding round estimate was released to all the counties, and that was the draft. In August, the finals were released, and then in October, the final rubric or template of the document, the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, was released to all the counties and RTPAs. And so as the recommendation mentioned, this document is due to the California Transportation Commission on December 15th, so that would be next week. And then next steps would be working with commission staff on any clarifications, changes that we may have. And then in March, the commission will consider adoption of the overall State Transportation Improvement Program. I know that the document can be rather large and there's a lot of pages there. I would say the document itself, apart from listing of the projects, is largely a reiteration of policies and procedures that we've adopted in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. So no new policy here, all very much a reiteration of what the board has approved before. And so in summary, the 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program is the programming action for your 2023 funding round awards. And it also lists previous awards from previous cycles. And the recommendation is for the Transportation Committee to recommend to the Board of Directors approve the Regional Transportation Improvement Program by resolution attached in your packets. And I would like to make a final point before concluding that our partners at the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and El Dorado County Transportation Commission prepare their respective regional plans. And I believe Placer staff presented theirs yesterday at their board meeting, and El Dorado staff will present theirs today, this afternoon at their board meeting. So we're all very much in lockstep, as I'm sure other counties are. But that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify anything for the committee.
Thank you. Do I have questions on this item?
Trying to raise my hand.
Okay. You can just wave it at me. I'll see you. Director Branscombe.
Thank you. First, on the detail support for this, it has under Yuba County RIP shares the city of Yuba City. Well, it's confusing because Yuba City is in Sutter County and Marysville is in Yuba County. So Yuba City, it should be listed under another county, and I understand the confusion. And the other is, and forgive me, I'm probably displaying my own ignorance here. This is RTIP project list summary. And I know in 25-26, there's a program for the 22nd Street work in Marysville, James. Is that a different program?
Yes, yeah, if I could.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that I wasn't missing something. Thank you.
No, yeah, thank you. To the point of the City of Yuba City project, because we do pool the 4 county funds, sometimes a project will be placed in a different county than it's actually in. In practicality, the pooling of the funds kind of just allows us to, apologies.
Okay, I'm looking at page 4 of 4 in one of the attachments, and 4 of 4 shows Yuba County RIP shares. Then it says City of Yuba City on the line, and Garden Highway Improvement Project. And in 25-26, which is about when we're expecting the that program for the East 22nd Street work to happen, is that a component of that 3.9 million there?
Oh, no, sir. So the 22nd Street is going to be funded by the other funding types.
That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Miguel? All right, I'm not seeing any hands up. Then
Saying that.
I'm sorry, did I hear somebody? No. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. Then I will check to see, do we have any public comment? Open up for public comment on this item.
There's no public comment.
All right. Seeing none, then I will bring it back for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Branscombe and Gog. All right. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early,
Aye.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner, absent Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
and Chair Galdo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
So Miguel, just when I thought I had all of my terminology down for RIP, TIP, strip, I now have Peace Pavement Clarification Index is my new PCI terminology. Thank you for that. I'm sure I needed it deeply. All right, we'll move on to our next action item. And that is our SB 125 Transit Funding Initial Allocation Plan Approval. And Chris Daughtry will be presenting.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. Chris Doherty with your transportation team here. The item before you this morning is the request to approve or to send to the board to approve the initial allocation for Senate Bill 125 funding. SB 125 was created in July of this year out of the governor's budget and created new one-time funding for transit for both capital and operations. Approximately $5.1 billion in funding was made available statewide through two programs. The existing Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, or we call it TIRCIP, and the new program, Zero Emission Transit Capital Programs, ZETCP. It does not flow off the tongue the way TIRCIP does. This funding will come directly to the RTPAs by formula. SACOG is slated to receive approximately $238 million in funding over the course of the program. And as I said before, both capital and transit operations are eligible through this program. To access these funds, SACOG is required to submit an initial allocation plan by December 31st of this year. That allocation plan is required to do to include the following: a short-range financial information for all of our transit operators in the region, in the 4-county region, a transit fleet information for the fleet we have in the region, and a description of the allocations requested for that funding. The item before you today is that requested allocation portion of the submission. It is important to note that after the December submission, allocation plans are able to be amended on a rolling basis and be updated at any time. So we can add or amend our plan at any time after the December initial allocation. In preparation for this item in front of you and to come up with this initial plan, staff did a series of one-on-one meetings and some group meetings with all of the regional transit operators and some of our passenger rail partners. That includes Sacramento Regional Transit, Yuba Sutter Transit, YOLO Bus, Unitrans, and South County Transit. We also met with Capital Corridor and San Joaquin JPA. We did that really to address what their needs were throughout the region. And got a really good idea and had some fantastic discussion as we did that. But given the minimal amount of time we had to put together a plan that would address our needs by December 31st, which is a very short amount of time, the guidelines for this program were finalized and released to the public in September 30th of this year. So this has been a very fast run up to this program. So because of that minimal amount of time, we staff recommended to submit a partial allocation that really just addresses some near-term issues, and then step back and do some more strategic thought around with our partners about how to fund projects moving forward after this December deadline. So this the list in front of you today really focuses on 3 near-term issues that we wanted to resolve soon, and that was existing capital projects with a cost overrun that could be at risk of losing their grant funding, matching funds for the upcoming TIRCIP Cycle 7 competitive program that should be released to the public and applications due in March. And also some near-term planning activities. The idea here is to launch some of those near-term planning activities so at the tail end of this funding, we could be implementing some of those activities moving forward. That they'll focus on reconfiguration of transit in a post-COVID environment. Also included in this allocation is to fund some of the SACOG activities to administer these funds and to put together some of those. So this plan allocates approximately $45.2 million in project requests. And it is important to note, out of that funding, $44 million of that is for projects that are seeking grant funding. So those funds would only be awarded to the agency if they are successful in securing those grant funds. So if they apply for TIRCIP, for example, cycle 7 and are unsuccessful, those funds stay in the SACOG pot, and then we can amend our allocation plan moving forward and reallocate them at a later time next year. And then the $4,000 remaining was for staff costs to administer this program moving forward. I did want to make one last point, and that is that this is an initial plan and strategy, is not meant to be the framework for this program moving forward, but more to really address these just near-term issues that we want to get solved and in front of CalSTA, who we have to submit our allocation plan to by December 31st. So we'll be stepping back as staff and coming back to this committee and the board with a more strategic thought around how to allocate these funds moving forward. So this is not the only time, you only bite the apple. This will be the first of many times that you're going to hear about this program moving forward. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Chris, I actually had a couple questions for you. So when I'm looking at this, I first thought it was initially just investment in equipment, and capital, but it also says operating funds if they're in danger of cutting a route or to add routes. Is there some way to verify that there were routes that were up for potentially being eliminated that they're going to continue with due to funding, I'm assuming? And are we going to see or verify then that routes were added, service was added?
Sure, that's a great question. This is something we addressed in those one-on-one meetings with the agencies that we met with, and there were no near-term cuts that were slated in this budget cycle because they had already done their budgeting for the year, so that we focus this on those near-term efforts. Part of that financial analysis that we will have to complete, the short-term financial analysis, plus the more in-depth long-term financial analysis that the program requires us to do some level of auditing for all of our transit agencies, will identify some of those issues, and you will probably see some of those come in later allocation requests.
Thank you. Yeah, I hadn't seen any proposed reduction, so I want to make sure then it's either going into equipment or we're seeing additional service. Thank you. Director Branscombe.
Thank you. And I don't mean this question by way of criticism or anything, but I noticed that U.S. Sutter Transit is not on this list. They weren't engaged, or what's the status there?
We did engage U.S. Sutter Transit staff to address their needs. Their needs focused more around their new transit facility. And so that those are the kind of things that we'd be looking at that next year more strategic allocation request for capital projects. We've actually been working with Matt and his team at U.S. Sutter Transit on this. I talk to him quite often. And so, yeah, I want to reassure you that we've absolutely been engaging them, and their requests are in our queue and under consideration for a next series of allocation requests that we'll be making and determining.
Thank you. That helps me. In case I get asked a question, I'll have an answer. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Autumn Bernstein.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to jump in because I think it's, when you look at this list, it's a bit, eye-popping to see SAC-RT getting so much money and the smaller transit operators like ourselves getting very little. In fact, we're the only small transit operator on the list getting any in this round. I just want to reinforce what Chris was saying. SACOG staff have really been working with us. Again, this is the first cut at these funds, and it really, because of the short timeline, anything that was going to be put into this round had to be fully scoped and really ready to go. So that's why there was just not a lot of things that frankly made the list for us, and I think for many of the other small transit operators. But we are confident going forward, once we have a bit more time to prepare for the future allocations, that that we'll be able to get an equitable share for our county. So I hope that's helpful in addressing any concerns that may be there on behalf of the small transit operators.
Thank you. I think that's great feedback for me to hear. Any other questions? All right, not seeing any, then I will open this up for public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
All right, we'll close public comment. I'll bring it back for a motion.
Lauren will move the item for SB 125 funding.
Thank you. And I need a second.
Second, Chapman.
Thank you. Moved and seconded, roll call vote, please.
Director Branscombe,
Yes, ma'am.
Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early,
Aye.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner absent, Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
and Chair Gallardo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to our information item, and this is the tolling in the Sacramento region and YOLO 80 Corridor Improvement Project. And we're going to begin with our presenter, with Kathleen Hanley.
Thank you, Chair Gallardo and Directors. It's a pleasure to present to you this morning. I'm Kathleen Hanley. I'm a principal planner on your transportation team. Item 7 is an information item on tolling in the Sacramento region and the YOLO 80 Corridor Improvement Project. Perfect. So I know this committee and the board have received several presentations throughout this year on managed lanes and tolling in general, but I'm going to start my presentation this morning with some more background just to reframe the conversation. We'll also have a high-level discussion on tolling governance, although that will be the focus of the Strategic Planning Committee's meeting later on Monday morning. I'll go through some high-level details on the YOLO 80 Corridor Improvement Project, and most importantly, we'll discuss the Assembly Bill 194 tolling authority process with the California Transportation Commission and the critical role that SACOG plays in advancing that kind of an application. So to provide some background on the definition of managed lanes, at a high level, a managed lanes is a lane that is managed by one or more qualities of the vehicles that are allowed to use the facility. It comes in a lot of types, and we use this term very interchangeably, so I want to be specific about what the lay of the land is in terms of what managed lanes options are available. The most common type that we see is the second one listed here, which is by occupancy, those high occupancy vehicle or carpool lanes. We have many of them in the Sacramento region and elsewhere in California. You can also have lanes that are managed by vehicle type. The photo here shows a bus-only lane that exists in Santa Cruz, and there are also some short segments of truck-only lanes, largely over the mountains into the Los Angeles area. You can also manage lanes by time of day. So this looks like reversible lanes. The photo here is on the Golden Gate Bridge, which used to have a center lane that was changed direction depending when the peak was. And also there are part-time shoulder uses. It's mostly shoulder during the day, and then during the peak you use part-time to be able to help alleviate some congestion. And then the main focus of our conversation today is going to be a type of managed lane, which is a toll lane. There are two types of toll lanes. One is a high occupancy toll lane. In a high occupancy toll lane, high occupancy vehicles or carpool vehicles are able to use that facility for free. The individual facility has a definition on what is considered a high occupancy vehicle. Typically in California, it's either 2 or 3 or greater passengers. And in order for single occupancy vehicles to use that lane, they must pay a toll. Express lanes are another type of toll lane where all passenger vehicles are required to pay a toll to use the facility, but typically high occupancy vehicles receive a discount. So the difference between the two is small, but essentially carpoolers have to pay even a small amount in express lanes and traditionally are free in hot lanes. So tolling in California exists largely in the Bay Area and Southern California, and there are two sort of general models in the way that tolling is deployed throughout California. So the first, I'm going to generalize using the San Mateo US 101 example. So this really looks at a corridor model where the tolling authority and the policies are really specific to one facility, in this case, US 101. And so it gives that tolling authority the ability to provide maximum flexibility in terms of setting policies that work best for that route and the operations that it needs. Some of the downsides of having a corridor model, which I think is experienced by a lot of the agencies that are in the Bay Area, are that it takes a lot of coordination between the various tolling authorities, especially the ones that have facilities that are adjacent to each other, in order to have a seamless user experience for the driver who is using the facility. And also you have some duplicative overhead in terms of administration and staffing that need to be for each individual corridor when they have a corridor model of tolling facilities. There's a regional model, which is used by Los Angeles Metro in Southern California. And so LA Metro has several toll facilities on different routes in different parts of its jurisdiction. And they're able to have kind of universal branding and policies that relate to all the express lanes, which makes it a bit more clear to be able to communicate with the general public on, what are the times of day, who is going to get discounts, how does the pricing work depending on how much their congestion is, a little more uniformity across the different toll facilities. Of course, whenever you have regional coordination and a regional model, it requires a lot more working together, and then folks who have individual interests on the different parts of the routes, those different jurisdictions have to kind of come together and make decisions collectively on the routes. So generally speaking, in the Sacramento region, we've been discussing more about using the regional model, and then that'll be sort of the focus that we talk about today. So I want to talk a bit about what is planned in the SACOG's currently adopted Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Communities Strategy regarding tolling in the Sacramento region. So this map here, although the lines are fine, show that generally speaking, within the 20-year time frame of our currently adopted Metropolitan Transportation Plan and a little bit beyond, most of where we expect tolling to exist in the Sacramento region is largely around our urban core. So we have Interstate 80 beginning at the Solano County line there through Yolo County, across onto US 50 and a bit towards El Dorado, and then Interstate 80 across the top through Sacramento and a bit of Yolo County, and then moving up into Placer County. And there's a tiny segment there on State Route 65, a bit on State Route 99, and continuing down towards Elk Grove in southern Sacramento County. So there's a lot of counties and a lot of cities that we expect to interact with the tolling here ultimately at the build out that we expect. And so that's really why we've been looking at a regional approach and why we're bringing this to all of you today to discuss. There are two projects in particular that are kind of top of mind in terms of what's happening with tolling in the region. The first, which will be the focus of today's presentation, is on Interstate 80 in Yolo County. That project is currently in the environmental phase and construction is partially funded. I'll provide more detailed information about what the status of that project is, but I also want to flag that Interstate 5 in Sacramento County is also currently in the environmental phase. Its construction remains unfunded, but we expect there to be an environmental document and more of the process that we're experiencing right now with Interstate 80 and YOLO to be coming forward there. So we're really focusing on a regional conversation here. So to provide some high-level information on the YOLO 80 Corridor Improvement Project, I'll refer to it as YOLO 80 for the rest of the presentation. Overall, the project's purpose is to improve person throughput and goods movement and improve travel choices or modality and also the reliability of those choices on the YOLO 80 corridor. I think all of us in the region use the YOLO 80 corridor to get to our neighboring region in the Bay Area, and all have experienced what even, to Director Branscom's point earlier, even a single car broken down in the lane can do to that facility. This project is being managed by Caltrans District 3 and YOLO Transportation District. And so they're really the experts here on the elements of the project, should any of the directors have any questions related to that this morning. In terms of what the funding status is for this project, it currently has $97 million of committed funds. The bulk of those funds are federal infra funds in the amount of $86 million. And those funds have a very tight timeline on when we need to obligate them in order to maintain those funds and advance this project. But the total project cost, depending on the alternative, there's a range of alternatives currently under in consideration by the draft environmental document. That total cost can range from $230 to $465 million.
Oh, shit.
There are several project alternatives, as I mentioned, that are in the draft environmental document that's currently out for public comment. Although the draft environmental document does not have a locally preferred alternative, YOLO Transportation District has adopted tolling as their locally preferred alternative. Within the 7 different alternatives that are in the environmental document, 3 of them are different types of toll lanes. So as we discussed earlier, when I gave you a toll lanes 101, 2 of them are hot lanes where carpoolers would be able to use the facility for free. One option where carpooling is considered 2 people, one option where carpooling is considered 3 people. And then the third toll lane option is an express lane in each direction. Of the non-toll alternatives, there's no build, very traditional for an environmental document. Also looking at adding just a carpool lane or an HOV lane in this facility, adding a transit or a bus only lane by another definition in that same space. And then the 7th alternative is to convert the inside general purpose lane to a carpool lane. So that would be the option that is on the bottom of the little graph that's shown to the right here. So the project schedule, the draft environmental document was released by Caltrans on November 13th. Comments are due on January 5th of early next year. And the final environmental document is expected in March of this year. We'll talk about this tight timeline and how it intersects with actions that this committee and the larger board will consider in the coming meeting. Design is expected to be completed later this summer. Those infra funds that make up the bulk of the committed funds that are on the project, those need to be obligated or start needing to be spent in September of this year. So we're expecting, of course, construction to start around that timeline to maintain those funds. And construction can take 2 to 3 years, depending on the exact alternative that's chosen. So I've been talking about the delivery of this project and kind of the general delivery phases that we talk about with construction projects, which is that you start with planning and you move into environmental, then you do design, and ultimately you do construction. But truly, when it comes to a price managed lane project, the process is much more complicated. And SACOG staff and Caltrans District 3 and YOLO Transportation District staff have been working closely together on all of these bits and pieces that are on the bottom arrow shown here on this slide to get all the items in place so that the project can stay on schedule and maintain these federal funds that many folks in the region worked very hard to secure for this project. So attached to your staff report, included in the committee's packet, is a draft Joint Powers Authority agreement that suggests a regional approach to tolling. Now, I imagine this will be the source of great discussion here this morning and also on Monday. Just want to provide some clarification on what we're suggesting as an initial place to start the discussion. So the idea to have that more regional approach on the delivery of tolling is to create a new Joint Powers Authority between SACOG, Caltrans, and YOLO Transportation District, specifically to create the JPA in such a way that as toll facilities come on board in Sacramento County, Placer County, or other counties, that there's an opportunity for this JPA to be able to grow, accommodate, and share the balance so that we can really have a regional collective approach to delivering tolling. So what's proposed in the draft JPA that's included to the staff report is for SACOG to have 2 seats on the board of the JPA. One of those would be an at-large position, and one of those would be an elected official from the counties that are currently included in the tolling authority. So in this initial configuration of the JPA, where it's just the YOLO County project, SACOG would have 1 at-large person on the board and 1 from YOLO County. Caltrans participation in the JPA board is still ongoing and discussions. There's some language about that in the JPA, and we have folks here who can provide more discussion on that point. The idea for YOLO and for future counties is for each of those to have 2 elected officials on the board. So to start, YOLO Transportation District would have 2 elected officials on the JPA board, and then a future county that came on would have 2 from their county, and then SACOG would add an additional elected official for that county from its board, maintaining the original and the 1 at large. So the reason that we're bringing this before you all and before the board for discussion this board cycle, and most importantly for action at the January meeting, is really this piece on the Assembly Bill 194 tolling authority process. So at a high level, Assembly Bill 194 delegated authority to the California Transportation Commission to approve tolling on state highways. And so the California Transportation Commission has this process by which you need to seek approval from them in order to be able to install a toll facility. Importantly, the only folks who can seek tolling authority are a regional transportation planning agency or an entity that has been designated by the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. So since SACOG is the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for YOLO County, SACOG plays a critical role in being able to advance this project within YOLO County. So the AB 194 tolling authority process has 3 main components. One is a project application. It's very long, 60+ pages, and it has these predefined sections which are detailed more specifically in your staff report, and they must be submitted by the entity that's actually requesting the toll authority. So in what we're considering for discussion now, that would be the JPA ultimately submitting the application to request the tolling authority. There's also a required public hearing that's arranged by CTC staff and must be located near where the project's actually going to be implemented. And that public hearing must occur prior to the California Transportation Commission meeting where they consider the application. Then ultimately there'll be a California Transportation Commission meeting where they make the decision. That decision comes with 2 items on the agenda. One is an information item that's presented by the applicant, and the second is an action item that's presented by CTC staff. So the roles and responsibilities between these different groups in terms of delivering this process, as I've mentioned, SACOG as the RTPA needs to both consent to the creation of a JPA, should the board just decide to move in that direction for that JPA to seek the tolling authority approval. And then also as the RTPA must consent to the JPA submitting the application for that facility within its jurisdiction. YOLO TD and Caltrans as the project managers continue to be the ones with the responsibility to manage the development of the project and ultimately those decisions on design and the other pieces related to the toll facility application. They've also been providing the bulk of the support on the writing of the application and the necessary supporting documentation on how the facility will work and what is needed for tolling authority. They'll also need to consent to the creation of the JPA as JPA members. And then ultimately, it's the JPA who submits the application to the tolling authority and then manages the operations and maintenance of the toll facility moving forward. So to put that all on a timeline for you all, so you can understand how these bits move together and how we've come before you today for discussion and in January for action. So if we start at the right side of the timeline here, the California Transportation Commission meeting that we need to go to for the toll facility application in order to maintain those infra funds needs to be their March commission meeting, which is also when the YOLO 80 EIR is scheduled to be certified. Then that toll facility public hearing that I mentioned that needs to take place prior to that meeting would need to take place sometime between late February and early March. So if we move backwards towards where the tolling application is due in late January for CTC staff to be able to review it and schedule the public hearing and have the item ready for their March commission meeting, really we need the action to take place on the support of the toll facility application in January, which is what's creating the urgency here for this discussion this morning and on Monday, and ultimately for the action in January. I want to be clear, though, that there are lots of parts of tolling governance that don't need to take place and where conversations can still continue and where there isn't as much urgency on some of these discussions and lots of opportunity for directors and, of course, the directors that could be on the JPA to ultimately discuss after that decision. So in terms of what interagency governance discussions need to happen prior to the creation of the JPA and the application submitted to the CTC, really it's mostly about high-level roles and responsibilities and the actual JPA agreement language. All of the very critical pieces to the delivery of these projects and the success of the JPA, like how the JPA, who would actually be on the JPA board, the staffing, things like toll price, discounts, and operating hours, how any excess revenue would be spent in an expenditure plan, and looking at issues of equity, including an equity and tolling study, could be done by the JPA after this process. There are also lots of steps at which the SACOG board has the authority to come back and review things like a toll facility application and expenditure plan. So the JPA would do the bulk of the work, but things would still come back to the larger SACOG board. So it's a lot of information I provided. I'm sure lots of folks have lots of questions and discussion to have here. I do want to provide an opportunity. This is really a regional project. So I'm going to hand it over to the YOLO Transportation District Executive Director, Autumn Bernstein, to provide some remarks.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I really appreciate SACOG staff and leadership for all your work getting us to this point. Listen, I know that this is a lot of information. This is a key priority project, not just for YOLO, not just for SACOG, but really for the Northern California mega region. It's the land bridge connecting the Sacramento region and the Bay Area, and it's one of the worst bottlenecks in Northern California. We're cognizant of the need and desire to develop this new tolling authority in a way that it's flexible and can accommodate additional projects in Sacramento and Placer and El Dorado County, so that those counties don't need to reinvent the wheel and do everything that we're already doing and create those inefficiencies. It is a tall order to pull this all together over a very short timeline, but unfortunately that is the reality that we have with the federal grant. It would literally take an act of Congress for us to get an extension on those dollars. So we are doing the best we can with the kind of ridiculous timeline that we have, and we appreciate your flexibility in working with us to get this across the finish line so we don't lose those federal funds. The YOLO TD board will discuss this draft JPA agreement, the same version that you're looking at our board meeting next Monday. A quorum of our board is actually here and serves on this transportation committee. And we have been advised by our attorney that this is not a Brown Act violation because this meeting is also publicly noticed and complies with the Brown Act. So I'm not going to speak on their behalf. They're here and they can share their thoughts with you, but I'll simply state that from the staff perspective, we believe this draft JPA agreement does a good job balancing the needs of YOLO County and the region. There's several unresolved issues, particularly the role of Caltrans, and we're committed to working with Caltrans and SACOG and the other counties in the region to resolve those outstanding issues before this comes to you for a final vote in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn. And before I hand it back to Madam Chair, I'll open it up to Caltrans District 3 Deputy Director of Traffic Operations, Brian Alkinsell.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Chair, Vice Chair, and directors of the Transportation Committee. For those who don't know me, Brian Appenzell, Deputy District 3 Director of Traffic Operations. I have met several of you. I'm responsible for the safety programs, mobility programs, and portions of our capital outlay support programs. I'm here today under the authority of District 3 Director Amarjeet Benapal. So why should Caltrans be a voting member of the JPA is a question that we want to just address briefly for you. In every past discussion, we agreed to have equal representation in the JPA with 2 voting members from YTD, Caltrans, and SACOG initially, and then growing from there. As Caltrans is the owner and operator of the state highway system, we can be the tolling authority, but in the spirit of partnership, we propose to work with SACOG and YTD as equal partners. The department is exploring where we will take the lead on tolling authority. We have already started that process in other parts of the state. Ultimately, the agreement needs to be reviewed by our legal team to be considered by the director's office. For those of you with experience working in partnership with Caltrans, you know that we have much more success working together than working against each other. As equal partners, we can stand together before the CTC and at public meetings to show true collaboration between agencies. The JPA could also leverage what we bring to the table, our existing transportation infrastructure, our project delivery team, and our TMC incident management facility and experience. Our plan would be a question that has come up in the past is Caltrans going to be nimble enough to make decisions timely? And I'll just say that our plan would be to hire an executive director for the JPA to brief all members in advance and ensure timely input on decisions and votes to take place. There should be no concern with providing timely input and votes as we work together in the JPA structure. Upcoming managed lanes projects are not fully funded, as mentioned by Kathleen, and will likely be built in phases. As equal partners, we can bring our experience together to complete multiple phases of projects, quickly adapting to the situations as they arise. So ultimately, our comment is that we would like to be considered for equal partnership, as has been the case in all of the planning meetings that we've had up to this point for the last 8 months. That's it.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the presentation. The timeline obviously is a concern, but it is not one of our own making, but it is certainly a tight timeline. So this is our opportunity to have some dialogue and give some feedback. And so I will open it up to the committee. I see Director Branscombe has a hand up.
Thank you. First question, on one of the earlier slides, consent was required on that timeline on the critical path. And I saw SACOG consent and YOLO Transit District consent was required, but was confused with is Caltrans consent required on the critical path?
So I may need to answer that, and Kathleen, jump in if you'd like. There, under AB 194, which is the statute that enables submitting a tolling application, either the RTPA can submit the application, which would be SACOG, or a JPA can submit the application, but SACOG would have to consent to the JPA submitting that application. And then in either, or as Brian mentioned, Caltrans could do their own application. But in either a SACOG application or a JPA application, the application has to show cooperation with Caltrans. So that's one of the factors that the CTC is going to be looking at, is whether there's cooperation with Caltrans. And AB 194 and the CTC doesn't say how that has to be done, how that has to be shown. That's up to us. It wouldn't technically be consent, but there'd have to be a level of cooperation shown to get that application approved.
And how is that cooperation defined or presented? How would that be presented?
So that, and Autumn, feel free to jump in here too, or Kathleen, go ahead.
Yeah, so there are sections in the AB 194 application that talk about how the project can demonstrate cooperation. The language right now discusses the regular meetings that all 3 agencies have had throughout the life of the project in sort of the coordination moving forward. And then also right now it has language on that would talk about if the JPA was created, that the existence of a JPA with these 3 partners is a demonstration of cooperation. So there's not specific language in the AB 194 guidelines that demonstrate a critical bar of what cooperation is. So we have some opportunity to demonstrate it. And there has been good cooperation to date.
My comment then on whether or not Caltrans be included as a voting member, if you will. First of all, I'm in big favor of local control. And the Caltrans, this would be District 3, I presume, would be the active party if they were there? Or would it be Caltrans Central?
Go ahead, Mike.
The way it's written, okay, that's part of what would be under discussion. The way that it's written under the draft is it would be a Caltrans seat, so it would be up to Caltrans.
Yeah, well, that concerns me. I've seen, we've seen some concerns expressed by senior Caltrans employee who became quote unquote whistleblower, particularly with respect to piecemealing and some other less than even-handed practices. And I'm concerned, frankly, by the Caltrans comments here. Brian's comments, frankly, and I don't think I'm overreading this, sounded heavy-handed. And when it, the comment about rather than working against, that sounded threatening. And that's far from a spirit of cooperation. I'm concerned about Caltrans being a voting member on this. I think we could, I'm very much in favor of local control, and Caltrans can be ex officio available for advice and what have you, but I'd be worried about a heavy-handed approach, and Caltrans, well, that's been my experience. Anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you, Director Ranscom. Other comments from the committee? Questions? You get a thorough presentation. You got all that covered. This is our opportunity to provide feedback. So if you have anything else that you'd like to add before I open it up for public comment.
I would just comment that, we are always in search of more revenue to support our local transportation system. I think some people may believe that help is coming, from the state or from the federal government to help us out of our sort of transportation backlog of projects and needs. But I can kind of authoritatively tell you that's not likely, just because there isn't enough money to do that. I think our responsibility here really lies with ourselves. And we have to find the revenues, we have to make the priorities. And so tolling is one of those options where we can generate revenue in a method that is not a tax, that is an option for people. And to me, it's got enormous value and potential to alleviate some of the pressure on our system and provide us with a lot of revenue to maintain things that otherwise it's very unlikely we're going to find the resources to do. So I in a way wish we didn't have to go to tolling, but I think it's the best alternative given the reality of our situation. So I'm kind of excited about this project in that sense.
Thank you for that feedback, Director Sander. Any others?
We do have a public comment, Chair Gallardo.
Okay, thank you. Then we will, I'm trying to say, Vice Chair Soon.
Thank you, Chair Gallardo. Yeah, I actually just had also a quick question. I wholeheartedly agree with Director Sanders' points as well, the need for this. My question is quickly to Kathleen, and thank you so much for you and Autumn, Ms. Bernstein, on that presentation. How flexible is this? We're going through a lot of environmental reports, and there were several options in there. And I was wondering how difficult would it be if we start with one model and then we decided, another one might be more prudent for the region?
Is your question, if I'm understanding it right, how much flexibility would the Joint Powers Authority have to alter the toll facility once it's under construction?
Not under construction. I'm saying like if we decided to do, let's say we did a hot lane system, then in the future we decided, well, actually we probably should have one for dedicated for, bus instead. and maybe, you know, maybe we wanted to switch that use, is how difficult is that? Do you have to go through an entirely new environmental report, or because we've already studied it as an option, or would we be able to make that change later on?
Autumn or Brian, as a project leads, want to address that if you can?
Sure, I can take a shot at that. So as Kathleen mentioned on the final slide, you know, there's a lot of decisions around hours of operation, what kind of vehicles are exempt, you know, those kinds of things that will be made down the road in a public process by the JPA itself. And so there's actually a lot of flexibility there. In order to apply to the CTC, we have to make a certain set of assumptions about what the operations will be in order to demonstrate that we've done our homework and that frankly, that at least the system will break even and would pay for itself and would have some benefits from a traffic management perspective. So we have made those assumptions in order to move forward with the application. But yes, once we actually have the tolling authority, then we would have the time to go through that process of really determining what's the best approach. And it could be that at certain hours, you know, it makes sense for it to be only buses and carpools and no toll vehicles, for example. We have a lot of flexibility around the management of those lanes once we have the tolling authority. Now, there may be certain actions that we'd take that may need to go back and do CEQA compliance, but in that case, you know, if those options have been studied in the EIR, I'm not a lawyer, so I want to be careful, but we may be able to go back and leverage some of the analysis that was done in the EIR.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Jennings.
Thank you very much. This is coming to us today as an information item, and I know we went through the timeline, but we went through a lot of information. I just want to make sure I understand what's going to happen at Monday's meeting, and then also what's going to happen in January. So if you could just kind of clarify that for me so I can know when we will actually move to action on this proposal.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And then James and others can step in to clarify the other pieces here. So today, as you mentioned, is an information item. I'll be giving a similar presentation at the board meeting first thing on Monday morning to provide the same sort of comprehensive overview of all of the pieces, details on the project, details on the toll authority application process, and a high-level overview of the governance. Later on Monday morning, there'll be the strategic planning committee meeting, and the focus of that discussion will be on the governance piece and on the JPA, the draft JPA agreement that's been included in all 3 staff reports. Then at the January board meeting, because there's no committee cycle for the January board, that there'll be the decisions on these items. So there'll likely be a series of actions that the board will need to consider that will all be required in order to advance this project on this very tight timeline with some slack, including the creation of the JPA, the submission of the toll authority application, and any other bits that might come together from the partners as we go.
Okay, so in January, we make the final decision on whether or not we move forward with the governance and the other points in this process.
Correct.
All right.
Great question. Thank you. It helped clarify for all of us.
Thank you.
Was there anything else you need to continue?
No, I just I appreciate Director Jennings, you asking the question on timeline, right? And we were trying to anticipate the questions you all might have this morning, including boy, this feels rushed. And I think Kathleen did a really nice job, and Autumn as well, and Brian just laying out. We really do have to make sure that we are doing everything we can to both figure out this structure, right, of a tolling entity, but make sure the project keeps moving. And as a mega region priority, and Autumn laid it out really nicely, how you described this corridor, how important this is for the entire Northern California. Mega region working group, mega region dozen. There are, and Kathleen had the slide, there are many other questions that can be answered and handled that come after the creation of the JPA in January. So we'll do our best to keep on really trying to specify which are the key things now and which can come later. So again, appreciate the question on timeline.
All right. I have not seen any other questions. So at this time, we will open it up for public comment.
Thanks, Chair Gallardo. We did receive a public comment. It is a letter from the Sacramento Transportation Authority that was sent out to the Transportation Committee members this morning. It's also posted on our website as handout number 1. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that. And the letter is requesting a meeting with SACOG regarding this item.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
There's no other public comment.
All right. Well, we will bring it back. Thank you so much, all of you. That was a great presentation. And again, we're all concerned about the timeline. It's a massive project and we're under some pretty darn tight timelines. So I appreciate it. Again, not of our making, but we're going to work around those. So thank you all for the input and we will be ready to have that discussion with the full board again on Monday. And from there, that is the last item on our agenda. Any other matters? Anything good for the order?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So just, I know this month, if you remember, the board wanted to advance the board meeting date for a couple of reasons, including attendance at the end of December. Also, the RTIP item we just heard has to get to the CTC by December 15th. So we will look forward to seeing you on Monday. Many of the items from this committee will just be, there's already in the board packet because there was so little time. But a couple of items that are not here today, but will be in front of you on Monday, which I just wanted to highlight. One of which is the annual highlights, and that's up and posted. You read your board packet. This agency and you as the board accomplished a remarkable amount of work in the past 12 months. I'm looking forward to reviewing that and reminding you all what you accomplished this past year. And then secondly, too, you'll have the nominating committee coming forward and making the recommendation for a chair and vice chair for next year for 2024. And thinking ahead to next year, and thinking ahead, not just the January board meeting, which will be an important one, but the whole year, you have a survey in your inboxes that came through my executive director report. You should have a link. It's hopefully pretty quick. It asks some questions around what do you find most valuable about being part of SACOG? What did you find valuable this past year with the activities we did, the workshops, the offsite board meetings, the tours? And it will help us. And then looking forward to next year and the year after, what are the kinds of activities beyond your board meetings that you would feel would be most engaging, that you get something out of? And as veteran board members know, we've done programs around the Cap to Cap trip. We've done tours to peer regions. We've done board retreats in the past. We're now doing these offsite board meetings and excited to come to Yolo County in March. Stay tuned for where we're going to be. But please, if you could fill out that survey, it really will help us kind of gear a program of engagement and activities next year. So links in your inbox. It's super easy. Please fill it out. And if you don't by Monday, we'll have a paper copy for you and we're not going to let you leave before you actually fill it out. So better to do it now.
Well, thank you. I wish everybody a happy holiday, but I'll see you on Monday. So thank you all and we are adjourned.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, thanks.